It was May 15, 1988. I packed my bags in the Philippines. I was ready to leave for New York and meet my husband there. You see, we had 2 children, but we had to leave them in the Philippines. Carla, 7, Paolo, 5. As I brought them to my mother's home, I hugged them tightly. And then I had to look back. I couldn't bear to look at them. And I took a 23-hour flight to New York City to meet my husband. We were going to start a new life in the United States. As soon as I got there, 23 hours later, it was very cold. I didn't have the right coats. I was jet lagged, just like I am today. I was tired, and we were hungry. So we decided to grab a bite to eat. We stopped by a restaurant, a fast food place in New York City, very busy, and I looked at the menu, and it looked like this. And I was so overwhelmed with this menu, and I saw people were falling in line to buy the food, so I fell in line. And I was watching what they were doing, but I was so confused with the menu, given my jet lag and my hunger. And as I kept on going closer to the cashier, I started feeling anxious, and I started feeling pressured. I didn't know what to order. What is a Happy Meal? What is a number 8? What is a super size? So as I got closer, I saw this mean gentleman. He wasn't very patient. Those of you who have been to New York, you know that patience is not allowed there. And he looks at me and he says, "To stay or to go?" And I looked at him. I was so confused. "What?" I said. He said, "To stay or to go?" And I looked at him again and I said, "To eat." And he said to me, "Next." I was embarrassed. I was humiliated. I was watching and I went back to the end of the line because I was hungry. I got to get my food. And I started observing the people in front of me, and I realized, oh, to stay means to eat here. To go means to bring the food home. So as I got to the front of the line, I took my not-so-happy meal from the not-so-happy person, and I left. That was the beginning of one of the many culture shocks I had to go through, my family had to go through, all my employees had to go through as we began our global journey. See, people make mistakes when we start doing business internationally. Sometimes they're embarrassing. We learn from those mistakes. So if you have a strong culture that has the values that are required, the leadership behaviors that are required to be successful in the international arena, then your company's brand will be sustainable. So let's look at this. Dusty had this picture, so I'm not going to elaborate on that, but at the first picture is your traditional transactional leader, where the leader thinks about everything. They plan, they strategize, they measure, and they inspect. Right? And there's some corporations still operate this way, but it is not the ideal way, especially we're talking about empowering teams here. And if you want to empower teams, there are transformational leaders. And these are leaders that bring people together regardless of hierarchy, not concerned about titles, not concerned as much about differences, but really concerned about ideas and how to make the team work together, being inclusive. And so we propose a third kind of leader called the trans-global team leader, somebody who could work across boundaries, somebody who understands cultural nuances, very, very subtle nuances can be picked up, somebody who understands how it is to bring teams together. So if you think about yourself, where are you in this continuum as a team leader? Where is your organization? And where do you want to be? So here are some myths about people who do business internationally. So I was called to coach an executive who's actually from Europe. He's from France, very successful in Europe. He was so successful that they decided to expand his responsibilities, and now he owns Europe and the United States. And so he moved to New York 2 years ago, and he's now responsible for a huge territory. I got a call, and the head of HR said, Lisa, we need you to help him. So I said, what's wrong? Well, he has not been able to replicate his success in Europe, in the United States. Top talent, very successful. He's actually failing now, and he has alienated his team. Cross-cultural training is not enough. Now, when I moved to Belgium a couple of years ago to be the head of HR International, I met a wonderful gentleman who became my executive coach, and he helped me understand the nuances of an Asian female senior executive sent by an American company living in Belgium with responsibilities for the rest of the world outside the United States. And it was difficult, I think, for my colleagues in Europe to view me. They didn't view me as American, for sure. They viewed me more as Asian. And with the help of my executive coach, I was able to understand the differences and be flexible. International assignments doesn't make you a global leader. We all know that. We have bosses who are from other countries, and there are some who are doing extremely well, and there are some that we're having difficulty communicating with. That's why the social maps are so important, because they transcend cultures. And lastly, if you do not develop your international team, they will not develop naturally. And in this particular case, I have to meet with every member of his team because his team has been alienated. He has the worst employee engagement scores in the company, and his results are very poor. So what are some of the mistakes that multicultural team leaders make? Have you heard this before? This is how we want to do it. You do it my way. What's interesting is when you start to work internationally is there's a saying that we like people who are like us, right? And so there's just a natural affinity to connect with people who have the same likes like you, the same chemistry like you. But when you work internationally, it's sometimes difficult to find. If you think about your culture, what's really interesting about culture is you don't see your culture, but you know it, you feel it. And anything that's your culture is comfortable. You're comfortable with it. Anything that is a different culture feels strange. Like I felt in that New York fast food restaurant. It's strange, right? And therefore you say it's bad. People naturally say that. Somebody who's different is strange, is weird, uncomfortable, makes you feel uncomfortable, therefore the culture is bad. That's generally what we try to say. When we think about language, right, so this is another mistake. We were called to go coach an executive who was American executive who moved to Japan. And when he got to Japan, he was so excited because the younger Japanese employees spoke English. And so he developed a relationship with the younger Japanese workers. But those of you who have done business in Japan know that what matters most in Japan is seniority, the hierarchy, and age. So when he started promoting the younger Japanese employees who spoke English, what happened? He alienated the rest of the workforce, and he alienated the customers. So that sensitivity alone, just because somebody speaks your language doesn't mean that they are the people that you should trust. All right? Okay, we know how to do things better in the West, right? So we try to just implement everything and send it back east. And you saw that this didn't work with Google. And cultural, it's their fault, right? They don't get it. So you travel to a different country, people ask you for your business card. How many of you have done business in Singapore? The way the business card is given in Singapore, you stretch the hand, you do a little bit of a bow, and you give the business card. And if you accept that business card, you look at it, you touch it, you don't just toss it like we do in America, right? In America, we say, oh, okay, hi, nice meeting you. But in Singapore, you're very respectful because that's the person's identity, right? In Indonesia, you don't look at people in the eye because that is not accepted. But if you do not look at people in the eye when you go to America, then they'll say there's something wrong with you. You cannot be trusted. So when we did the research, if you are a global team leader, what should you have? There are 6 areas of intelligence that are available in the literature that says these are some of the things you need to have. And if you don't have this, don't worry, because no one is expected to have all of this, as long as you are aware that these are the things that are required when you are a global leader. We talked about IQ earlier, right? So IQ is important, but IQ alone is not going to make you successful. Practice and focus is what's going to help you become successful. We talked about emotional intelligence earlier, right? Emotional intelligence includes self-management, self-control, and the ability to relate and connect with people. That's not enough. Business intelligence needs to be present too. Not just how the company profits, but how do the different connections of the different departments work so that the company can be successful. We talked about cultural intelligence earlier, right? So it's very important that you're sensitive to that. Moral intelligence. We talked about this earlier. Dusty referred to this, knowing the difference between right and wrong. The problem with people is not that they don't know what is right or wrong. We all know what's right or wrong. All of our leaders know the difference between right or wrong. The problem is not in the knowing. The problem is in the doing. Understanding the political system, understanding the government regulations, understanding the different connections, the local markets. These are the areas of intelligence that are important to be successful as a global leader. Now, it's impossible to have this all in one person. It's impossible, but at least be aware. And at least when you hire team members, look at the complementary skills. So that's why it's really important that you understand what the strengths of each of your team members are. So I'll just give you some examples of how to select members of your team. When you look at interviewing people, let's say you have to put together a team and it's a project that has a time bound and is very visible in your company. Look at things like, how do you learn? Ask them questions. If you're new in the job, how do you learn? And if somebody tells you, oh, I only want to learn by going to a workshop or by going to a university, it gives you a signal that they are just interested in one way of getting information. And what you want is to work with people who have diversity in learning. They either listen to audio, they do on-the-job training, they observe people, they coach others, they mentor others, so different ways of learning. You want people who are comfortable in socializing virtually. They use either Google Hangouts, or they use Facebook, or they use Skype, or they do face-to-face meetings. In our global environment, it's not always possible to go on a plane. Right? So people who are comfortable in virtually socializing and making that meaningful are maybe the people who you want on your team. Curiosity. Curiosity is important. So try to observe people when you're taking them into your teams. Are they just interested in what's going on in their little world, or are they interested in finding out what's going on in other parts of the world? And when you have people like that, you've got a team that's working effectively. So we've talked about the 5 leadership behaviors. You have it in your handouts if you were not able to write that down. The 4 strategies for building organizational capabilities. And I shared with you what's going to happen at the workshop tomorrow. And I'm also going to share with you a coaching model so we could do some peer coaching. So for those of you who are wondering what happened to those 2 cute children who I left behind in the Philippines, well, don't worry, I did not leave them there for a long time. My husband and I agreed that after a year that we got settled in the United States, we're going to bring them along. I hope to see you at my workshop tomorrow if you're interested about global differences and global culture. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.